I'm Dawn Montefusco, life coach for writers and creatives, and this is the Ultimate Writers Series, how to break through resistance, ignite the muse, and honor your soul's calling. And today we have a great guest, C.S. Lakin, who also goes by Suzanne Lakin. She's an award-winning author of more than 30 books, fiction and nonfiction, writing instructor, and professional copy editor who lives in the San Francisco Bay Area. Lakin's award-winning blog for writers, Live, Write, Thrive, provides deep writing instructions and posts on industry trends. In addition to the novels she's written, Lakin also publishes writing craft books in the series The Writer's Toolbox, which helps novelists learn how to write great books. You can get your free ebook, Strategic Planning for Writers in 4 Easy Steps, at her blog at www.livewritethrive, and you'll find all the details on her page but below. So hi, Suzanne.
Hi, glad to be here.
Yay, glad to be here too. So tell us a little about what you're working on and what your projects are these days.
Okay, well, I like to work on lots of different projects at the same time. So I'm working on a book, I'm working on an online course. The course that I'm working on for my online school at cslakin.teachable.com is on emotion. It's the emotional craft of writing. And while this is specifically for fiction writers, I think it could also work for memoir writers too. But the idea is that emotion, the topic of emotion is twofold. You need to show your characters in your story emoting. They have to have believable emotions, but at the same time, you also need to evoke emotion in your readers. And that's a completely different thing. And a lot of times the emotion that you want your readers to feel is very different from what your characters are feeling. So this is a huge topic that very few books cover, very few blog posts or podcasts I've ever heard on this topic. And I notice as I do a lot of editing and critiquing that I see in manuscripts a very difficult struggle with writers trying to figure out how to show their characters acting and reacting and emoting believably, and then also just failing to be able to evoke any type of emotion in me as a reader. So just because you show a character that's clenching their teeth or making a fist, it doesn't mean your readers are going to feel what they're feeling, or they're going to feel angry. Or if you have a character, you say a character is feeling sad, your reader isn't going to feel sad for any reason. So you have to learn the technique on how to really manipulate your readers in a very specific way. And that's basically what you have to do as a writer. It's very challenging. So that's a cool course that I'm working on. It's going to take some months to get that done with all my examples and movie clips and all the things that I use in my online courses.
I want to take that course. I love this.
I'll let you know when it's ready. So all my online courses are specifically for fiction writers. And also all my books are pretty much all my writing craft books, except for Crank It Out, which is my book, which kind of ties in with what we're talking about today, which is all about how to, get past your procrastination and all your excuses and all your distractions. And, we talked a little bit earlier off camera about this book that I'm working on now. I'm working on a novel. It's a thriller, and I've written some suspense mystery novels before. I have a few published, but this is the first time that I'm doing kind of I guess you would call like a law enforcement thriller. It's a paranormal thriller, but it has a lot of FBI agents and police and state troopers, and it has park rangers and has ATF agents and Joint Terrorist Task Force and all this stuff that I know nothing about. This is not my world. I don't come from that type of career. So it's really intimidating to me, but at the same time, I love my story idea so much that it was worth it to me to try to hack through all my resistance that I have to doing this type of project. I mean, it's really kicking my butt. It's probably the hardest novel that I've ever written. I have 20 or so published novels in a lot of different genres, but this is the first time I've really written something that I have to force myself to sit down and write it, because I have all those fears of failure. And, so I totally get when writers are feeling that resistance, like they're thinking way too much about further down the road when they are going to publish their book and how people are going to review it, if they're going to get bad reviews, or if an agent's going to reject them or whatever. I mean, all that stuff comes with the territory. We all face that type of rejection. I had just signed a publishing contract a few weeks ago with a publisher for my dark comedy that I wrote a year or so ago that my agent tried to sell and couldn't sell it. And I was really excited about this publishing contract. And I had very clearly explained to the CEO of this company on the phone what my vision for this book was. I said, I don't mind you asking me to rewrite this book or change things or add things or cut it or whatever, but it's really important that you understand why I wrote this, what the purpose of, what my audience is, what the genre is. And he's like, oh yeah, I get that. It's totally fine. Right. So he had his team put together a 26-page dissertation, which was basically totally revamping the entire book and missing every main point, including the important ending that my co-author and I wrote. Just completely missed it. And they totally disagreed. Like, we totally get what your book is. But we know what we're doing, and we think we could change this book into something else. But, I talked to my co-author, and we discussed it, like how much are we willing to sell our souls on this book that we really love, to sell 100,000 copies and get a movie deal for $1 million or whatever, which, is very possible we could have gotten those things because there was enough interest. It's that much of a hot type of plot topic. But it finally came down to the fact that we just felt like it was a huge sellout. It was a huge compromise to what we believed in that book. So again, you have those elements that are always in the back of your mind. How do I sell to an agent and a publisher? We backed out of that contract. We got our rights reverted back, and now we're back to square one again. What do? Are we going to self-publish? We're going to look for a new agent. I have an agent reading it right now who's going to give me some good feedback, a friend. So, that's been going on for a couple of years, and that can be very discouraging, but I believe in that project, and I'm just going to keep moving forward on it. And, you just have to not think so much about the future, what's going to happen to your book when you're in the writing process. And we had already written this book, and we love it, and it's already polished. So we're at a different stage than maybe, a lot of listeners are right now, where they're working through a book, they're writing a memoir, they're writing a novel, and they're just not getting anywhere. And I just feel that a lot of the problem for many writers who get stuck is they're thinking too much about the future. Absolutely. They need to get back to that joy of writing and just why they love to write and have fun writing. It's so much fun to sit down and write and have that just creative thing going where your characters start coming alive and telling you what to do and taking left turns that you're like, where are you going? Yes. So, you just got to go back to that when you lose that joy or you're feeling frustrated. Another thing that I suggest, which is what I do from time to time, I just did this last month, was just write something completely different. I took a walk in the woods. I went and visited a place where I used to live way up in Northern California. And I don't want to get all sad and weepy, but I took this walk and I passed this puddle. And this was the puddle that my Dalmatian used to sit in all the time and get muddy for years. And then, she lived to 14 years and we had to put her down. And that was, 8 years ago already. But just going back to that place and seeing that puddle, oh, it just broke my heart. So, I had to go back to my room and it was pouring rain and I just had to write. So I just started just free writing how it felt about missing my dog. And it just turned into this really interesting kind of second person free writing exercise that sort of morphed into a really great idea for an opening for a literary fiction novel that I've been wanting to write for about 20 years. And I thought, I could start that book with this. It got really creative and it was completely off there. I have it sitting right here on my desktop. I haven't even looked at it since I wrote it a month or so ago, but I know I'm going to do something with it at some point. Yeah. But at the moment, I needed to do something with those emotions because I was crying and I was just feeling really, I couldn't put a finger on what the emotion is. And this is what I talk about in my course too, is so much of what we feel emotionally, we can't name it. We just know, we know what it feels like. And we know what things make us feel like those same things. Mm-hmm. So the challenge for writers is to, when you read something that moves you, you need to look at how it was written and think, well, why did that work? Why did that move me? Mm-hmm. And then you tear that apart. Hemingway said, you read what affected you emotionally, and then you copy that, take that feeling, and then you copy it and try to do the same thing yourself.
Yes.
Yes. Because you can't just name an emotion. Emotions are complex.
What's interesting about the emotional part is it totally applies to memoir, mm-hmm. on a absolute level. Like I got my MFA in fiction, but I wound up becoming a poet and writing nonfiction and creative nonfiction and memoir. But what's interesting is using dialogue, using setting and detail, trying to get that reader to experience the emotion. Because just because you know your aunt, say it's a memoir, just because you know Aunt Sally was grieving and you're feeling, you know, like so heavy and depressed, that doesn't quite cut it in getting the reader to, even in memoir, you know, you have to take those liberties to get them in there. So I really love what you're saying about emotional writing, and the way that when you were, you know, sad about your dog, you were like, wait a second, I want, not only can I capture this, it's healing, right?
Yes.
And it's creative. And then in terms of the resistance, what I love is, oh my gosh, everyone's so concerned about what happens after they write their book without writing their book.
Right. Yeah.
What is like what do you think might be a practice? Like when you're, for writers who, you know, they take notes, they have different files, they've got their outline, they've got their mind mapping for their outline, they pretty much know where they're going, they have their path. It's a pretty well, you know, established path. They've worked with coaches or accountability partners or wordsmiths or whatever, but they're still not just sitting down and writing.
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways to deal with that, but and I do, you know, I put in my plug for my book, my Crank It Out.
Yes.
So because there's a lot in here, and I just kind of wanted to I'll read you a couple little things here where it says some great hacks for bypassing self-sabotage. Mm-hmm. So, you know, this is exactly what we're talking about, is this self-sabotage, and understanding why you do it is helpful, but it's not going to solve the problem. If you know you're afraid of rejection, okay, great. I own it. I'm afraid of rejection. It's still not going to make you sit down and write. Okay. So you need some practical things. So here's a couple practical ways to get writing. Okay. First of all, set a timer and go for it. Push through the negative self-talk and fears of failure and the need to be perfect, and make yourself write for 15 minutes without stopping to edit, criticize, reread, or make excuses. Just do it. So seriously, if you are really at that point where you've done all the research you can, and believe me, I write historical Westerns, so I have a room full of research books. I can waste years researching in order to not write. Okay, because writing just makes you have to work so hard. It's a hard brain activity. I often go to the library because if I sit here in my dining room, the floor is dirty, my dog wants to play, I need to water my plants. We writers will do everything and anything we can to not write, okay? I've learned this from people who are major best-selling authors. They will get up and clean out their refrigerator. They will do whatever. And these are, we all love to write. We love to write. Okay, so this is my book. It's called Crank It Out, The Surefire Way to Become a Super Productive Writer. And the reason I wrote this was I did a survey with my list and queried, 6,000 people, and I had hundreds and hundreds of replies back. And everybody was saying that the things that really they're struggling with is finishing a book and getting past procrastination and how to find time to write and making excuses. And, I understand that people are busy. We all are busy. We all have a lot of responsibilities and obligations, but at the same time, if you really love to write, you're going to find time to write. Mm-hmm. And we know that, but at the same time, even if we make sure that everything is perfect for our writing, we still don't write because we just have a hard time getting into that mindset of I've got to just concentrate and start writing. So as I mentioned earlier, it's great if you just free write and write something you just want to write. Also write in a completely new document so you don't have that pressure on yourself to write the perfect scene in your manuscript, or writing a chapter out of your memoir or whatever. So there's just ways to psych yourself out. So one of the ways that I recommend in the book is to just put a timer for 15 minutes and don't be connected to the internet. Don't allow for any distractions and just write. And just write and no editing, no complaining to yourself in your head, this is terrible. You just need to just write. And oftentimes if you just do that and the creative juices start flowing, you get past the initial resistance. It really, the worst part is just the moment when you have to sit down to write and you're telling yourself, okay, I've got to be perfect. I've got to write the best thing I've ever written in my life. There's just so much pressure we put on ourselves instead of remembering that we write because we love to write. It's just a joy to be able to write and to be creative and have fun with it. You know, if you just, decide you're going to write a first person cat, write your scene as a cat or as a caterpillar or as an alien from outer space or something. Just do something creative with the material that you need to explore so that you can just break past what you're doing. I often change the font. I'll be working on a chapter or something and I just feel stuck. So I'll just select all and then I'll pick a different font that's just completely weird. And I'll just start writing in that. And it almost feels like it's not me writing, it's somebody else writing because I would never write with that font. So, that's just a weird hack too. So that's a great way to edit your material too, is to change the font as you read it, to edit it, to check for your mistakes as you read out loud, because that, again, it just, it sort of short circuits your brain a little bit or detracts from your ordinary routine so that you can just do something a little more creatively. So, yeah.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. I'm loving all this. Everybody get that book. Crank it out. That's what it's all about. So, you answered so many amazing questions. I just love it. What about, let's see. What about this idea of honoring a calling? Like, I feel like people who want to write and they haven't written most of their lives, or they've given it up and they thought, oh, I guess that was just a pipe dream. I guess I wasn't supposed to do it. And then it's haunting them. And I joke and I say, I never get haunted that I have to go build a house or buy a giant canvas and paint on it. Or, I don't get haunted that I need to start a garden. It's not my thing. But I will walk around sad that I have not written. I will walk around. And so we take it for granted, I think, that if you are really wanting to write, that regardless of what happens with it, you have to write.
Yeah. So, they always say everybody has a book in them. Everybody has lots of stories. I don't think everybody's meant to write. I don't think everybody's called to write. And I've done some speaking about this topic too, because I think there's a difference between being gifted and having a calling. Because you can be very gifted at things. It doesn't mean you're called to do it. I mean, I'm a gifted artist. I can paint, and I used to play music and stuff like that. I have some gifts in some different fields, but I definitely wouldn't call it a calling. I mean, I definitely feel like I was called to write. So whatever that means to you, if you're feeling impelled or compelled to need to write and express yourself in writing, you should do it. And you should be faithful to that. I get that from a lot of people will come up to me and say, I just need to write this. I have something I need to write. I have a story I need to tell. And so it's just like anything else you want to do. You just sit down and learn. What do you need to learn? What are the skills you need to learn in order to do that? I mean, if I want to do a garden, like you're talking about gardening, I'm going to do some research. I'm going to look up how to do stuff. I mean, I do love to garden, and I recently just started planting a whole bunch of flower seeds, and I really wasn't sure how to do it. So I went online and I watched some videos, and I got my seeds, and I got all these like cool little, I'm looking at these like cool little racks, and I have all these little things to put all the little seeds in. I'm spraying them and misting them, and but I didn't know how to do it. So it would, here we go with our connection again. Am I stuck again?
You just got
because I just got a message that said my internet connection got weird. Okay, so anyway, so just like with anything, if you feel compelled to write, you just need to do your homework. You need to learn how to write. If you're going to work on a memoir, I wrote a memoir workbook called the Memoir Workbook, and it's just a step-by-step. It just tells you from the beginning, how do you start getting your thoughts together? How do you start organizing them? How do you put them in order? How do you know where to start? How do you know where to end? What's your themes? All those different little elements. It can be overwhelming if you don't know what you're doing, because writing is very complicated, especially if you want to write a book, and especially if you want to maybe write it to sell rather than just write it for yourself and you don't care how crappy it is. You got to do your homework. And I tell people this all the time, but it's really almost obvious and intuitive. If you want to know how to write a great book, read some great books like the book you want to write, and just see how they're done. Tear them apart. See how they're structured. How long are their paragraphs? How long are their chapters? What kind of description do they use? What type of writing style? How long is a sentence? I mean, all of these things you can study and you can tear them apart. And again, it's what we discussed earlier. It's like, if you read something that really moves you, well, then study how it moved you and why did it work? Why did it affect you? And then take that to the next step and see if you can apply it yourself. If people are interested in this whole idea of emotion and evoking emotion and how to convey emotion in your characters, I do have a lot of blog posts on that topic. So they can go to Live, Write, Thrive and just search for emotion, like evoking emotion or emotion in readers. And
it's a great blog, everybody. So seriously, I mean, plethora. You would never get bored. You will learn. And there's so many great, I mean, literally, it's almost like she nails it every time. I'm like, I got to read that one next. Now, if I would spend too many days reading your blog, I have other things to do right now.
Thank you.
But you really,
I think I have more than 1 million words in print on my blog. So
awesome.
Just free instruction. So it's out there. Blogs are great. Yeah.
What's one gift of inspiration that you would like to leave the listeners with who are really wanting to either start, finish, or just push through that resistance and just ignite that muse in them and go? What would be that one little piece of an inspiration?
Okay, well, maybe this might be kind of a negative way to do it, but let me just read this little bit in the end of my book, Crank It Out. It says, I have editing clients who've written a few novels, but those manuscripts are just lingering in a folder on their computer. These writers are not taking those next steps to publish. This isn't an issue of money. This is really about fear. And fear leads to things like procrastination, making excuses, striving to be perfect, and succumbing to endless distractions. One of the toughest and most important attitudes writers need to master is summed up in the famous words of Franklin Roosevelt. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. So when we work from a place of fear, it infects every aspect of our life. I recall one of my high school teachers lecturing us graduating students, describing how most people go through life content to taste the broth and never bite into the steak. That line stuck with me all these years, and it reminds me of another observation I heard somewhere, that some people live for 80 years, but they're really only living the same year over and over 80 times.
Wow.
Which implies that these people aren't really living. They're not stretching themselves, taking risks, trying new things. They're doing the same old, and frankly, that's a sad thing. Why do I say it's sad? Because life is short, and if we let fear hold us back from exploring all the many things we've longed to do, that's a tragedy. I'm not talking about a bucket list. Who wants to wait until she's old and feeble to climb Half Dome in Yosemite or drive cattle across Wyoming? Don't put off writing until you're too old or dead to write. So some people say, I'm not afraid, I just don't have time. But we know that there's lots of excuses. So if you're saying you have no time to write and you're not making this excuse just because you're unmotivated, then maybe it is fear. Maybe you may be afraid that if you co-opt time for writing, other areas of your life might suffer. Your family might end up hating you. Your husband will leave you. Your chores will pile up. You'll have a nervous breakdown. I've had a few of those because of writing. But I get all that. But these fears, grounded or not, have to be faced if you want to be a writer. It might take time, some trial and error to come up with a good schedule. And you might have to tweak your schedule from time to time, which is something I do. But if you want to be a productive writer, don't let those excuses stop you. So that's
gorgeously written.
Wisdom.
Yes, that was fantastic. You also, okay, time has gone by. We have to wrap up, but you also have a great free gift for us. Can you tell us a little bit about the gift on your page? It's on the link on this page. Tell us.
Okay, so, well, it's just a little PDF that you can print out. It's 20 things that'll inspire you to write. My daughter actually designed it and drew it up for me. So you could just print it out and put it on next to your computer, and it will just give you all these different suggestions. If you have 5 minutes, if you have a half an hour, if you have an hour, and what you can do to inspire yourself to write. And it's fun. So go ahead and click on the link. You sign up for my newsletter. And if you also, when you sign up for my newsletter, if you're a novelist and you click on to join the Novel Writing Fast Track group, you will get 2 free ebooks the first week. You can unsubscribe anytime you like, but I have a group of thousands of writers that are novelists that are in this email group there's no obligation or anything. It's just an email list, right? So you can just unsubscribe if you don't like it. But you can get free books, and we have a contest every month for free books and lots of great tips and things. So jump in there, just dive in, and you're going to learn a lot of cool things. So help you with your writing.
Great. Thank you so much. I love how you just give. I love your sort of your philosophy. You like give to give, you know,
Yeah.
and share. And I think that's what it's all about these days, especially. So thanks so much, Suzanne. It's such a pleasure. You know, I know that, you know, there's a little bit of the screen thing that, you know, people will see, but the audio is great. We listen to over and over again. I believe in repetition. I think if we just listen to these lessons, you know, and hear from someone who's so experienced, that slowly it sinks in that we're just normal. We're human. We're scared, and we can do it anyway. Yeah. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks, Dawn. Thanks for having me. It's fun.
So great. Well, you have a great day.
Okay, you too. Thank you.